It's one of the most ambitious businesses I've got to know.
Timing has been a huge factor in our success. The world of health tech is blowing up. But like any entrepreneur, we were eager to get going. Any entrepreneur knows building a business is lonely. We were pretty naive because whilst we didn't have experience in health and wellness, we also didn't have experience in real estate. Very useful to realise that things often happen for a reason.
Flagship announcement, the involvement of Steven Bartlett.
It's a 6-month journey to get him on board. Originally it was just come to our space, I want to take some photos. I mean, it reminds you that you're doing something special.
Vish, pleasure. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
You're very welcome.
I can't wait to hear the story about Until. I want to get into all of it with you. It's one of the most ambitious businesses I've got to know, and getting to know you and Alex over the past couple of years. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you. But let's start with your background. How did it all start for you as an entrepreneur? Give a sense of kind of what's come before Until and how you got to this point.
Like a lot of entrepreneurs that you probably meet, Adam, like it all started back in the playground, selling sweets. My parents ran a corner shop, and so kind of grown up around business. Went to uni at that time because I wanted to go into banking. Growing up, are generally pulled by the opportunity of making money, and that was the route lots of people were taking. Having graduated, I had the opportunity to move to New York, and that just felt like a more fun story to tell people. And I was moving there to join a startup. Now in kind of late 2000s, it wasn't really a thing, startup. Like it had the tech boom, and so it was more me going there because I thought it was a good story, and I joined this healthcare startup as one of the junior people on the team. And that was a wild ride. So spent 3.5, almost 4 years building that business, going from a very junior person in that team to one of the senior management team. And it was incredible, right? Drinking from a fire hose every day, learning about US healthcare, figuring out what it takes to build a business. That was a successful journey. That business eventually sold. And I found myself wanting to move back to London because I think had I stayed in New York for 10 years, 10 more years, I just don't know what would have happened.
It's quite grueling.
It's just intense. It's just intense. And I think, I moved back to London. I joined McKinsey because that felt less intense than working for a startup. And, that kicked off 10 years in consulting, right? So firstly at McKinsey, I then joined an incredible business called What If, which I know you're very familiar with. And that was, McKinsey, it was like the other end of the spectrum to McKinsey. Right? McKinsey's a very well known kind of corporate strategy consulting firm. What If came from the agency world, and just a totally different dynamic. It's where I learned what I was good at and what I wasn't, and I learned that marketing was not my strength. And so, look, I subsequently went on. We built another consulting firm after that, and had found myself taking the skills of startup, McKinsey, What If, and investing in startup businesses, early stage businesses. Some were my own, some were with partners, and some were just investments. And when I started the second consultancy firm, I had decided that I wanted to invest in my health and wellness. Right, as an entrepreneur, you often don't invest in that area of your life, and it can lead to pretty bad outcomes. And so, I invested in a PT for the first time because I could afford it. And health and wellness is kind of like a rabbit hole, right? You start somewhere, and then before I knew it, I had a physio, a massage therapist, a psychotherapist, and having been on that journey and seen the impact it had on not just my physical fitness but my mental health and my performance. I was quite excited about building something in that space. And so much like some of the other businesses I started, I was working out with my PT, Dan, who's one of our co-founders, and me and him were going to start effectively a small gym, right? But I didn't want to go down the consumer route. You'll have heard from some of the business you've invested in. I think it's hard, right? And health and wellness is no different. And so we wanted to build something to help these incredible PTs change the lives of their clients, but the systems that they worked in just weren't fantastic. And so that's how it started, right? That nub of an idea in 2018, and look, it just grew arms and legs as we continued to explore it and saw the opportunity that existed. And so look, I ultimately decided to leave that consulting firm to go into this full time. COVID hit, that kind of slowed things down. And then, we launched a business. We launched a business in the beginning of 21, and then actually opened our first site at the beginning of 22.
Fantastic. And what is Until for the uninitiated?
Yeah, so
how would you describe it? Because as you say, it's consumerized, but really you're building a platform for some of the biggest practitioners in the world. As you say, it kind of came from a personal point for you because you were going through that journey, but give a sense of what the business is today and where it's going to go tomorrow. Yeah,
so Until is going after building a platform in the health and wellness space, but really our primary client is the practitioner. So we are building an ecosystem where we put the practitioner at the heart of that. And when I say practitioner, that could be a personal trainer, it could be a physio, it could be a doctor, a dentist, a therapist. And so, we decided that was our primary customer. They're the people that we wanted to solve for. They're the people that we felt were currently just not supported in the way that we wanted to. And by building that community, what we've successfully done is now created an opportunity to create an ecosystem where consumers can have access, brands can have access. We can provide an amenity for landlords and their commercial assets. And over time, I think Until will become a leading health and wellness brand, which allows consumers to navigate what is becoming an increasingly difficult world of health and wellness.
And you have 3 sites today.
Yep.
And because as you say, you're kind of it's an ecosystem play to an extent. There's partners, practitioners, there's consumers, and landlords, the real estate side. Like the work is to bring it all together. But actually, as a consumer, it's a really simple proposition. I can go into one of your 3 sites today in London, and I will be greeted with some of the best practitioners in the world who work from there. But they're not buying from your brand necessarily. They're just working from those spaces with the best state-of-the-art facilities, but allow them to deliver the best care and services to those consumers. But for the practitioners, what did they have before? What was the problem you were solving for them? Were they working out of gyms and giving up all their money? If I think about if you're a PT, I imagine that 150, 200 pounds you're paying as a customer. I imagine a majority of that is actually going to the gym itself rather than the PT. But is that true for other categories as well?
I mean, look, that's what we found, right? These individuals are incredible. They've opted to go down a career path which is all about helping people. I mean, even particularly in the UK, health and wellness isn't particularly, no one goes to become PT or a physio or a psychotherapist to become a millionaire. They go in because they're passionate about changing people's lives. And they had traditionally 3 options. They either got a job, and salaries in those sectors are not great. They went freelance, and as you said, they give up anywhere between 60 and 90% of their income to a brand or a middleman. I mean, some of the numbers we've heard, Adam, are crazy. As you said, PTs, physios being charged out at 150, 200 pounds an hour and being paid 10, 15, 20%. I mean, it's remarkable in many ways. And so
essentially they're solo entrepreneurs, right? They're micro entrepreneurs.
And actually that was the problem, right? Is that, and then the third option for them is that they have to go set up a business. And so for most of them, they never have the capital or the risk appetite or the skills to go and set something up. But and those that do go from doing what they love to having to worry about real estate, finance, talent, all these other things, which are just the part of the reason they didn't do those things was because they weren't interested in them. And so that just felt broken, right? When you think about how integral these practitioners are to changing people's lives, it feels bonkers that they have those barriers. And so that's what we set about going to change. And as you said, we found it exists in every vertical. So we started in training, treatment and coaching, recently expanded into medical services and dentists as well. And really to solve this consumer challenge, which is, when I have a problem and you don't know, you don't know what the problem really is, so you don't know who you should go speak to. And then someone might say to you, oh, it's a physio, or it's an osteo or a chiro. I mean, most of the naive public don't know the difference. The next question is, where do I go? And so where most of us are reliant on Dr. Google, which, those who know realize is not the best source of knowledge, or a friend. And, now with the way that the market's going, people have realized that, a physio that might be brilliant for you is not necessarily going to be brilliant for me. And so, my demographic, my gender, my outcomes, my starting point, they're all different. And so you need a practitioner that's the right one for you. And so we're ultimately going to solve that problem in the market.
And from a consumer side, like it's a world-class experience. It's totally different being in your local gym or being, going into and see someone at Harley Street, which can feel like a, quite a traditional experience.
Yeah.
These are like incredible sites. So you walk in, you feel the energy, you feel like it's delivering world-class care and services to help people. So it's a fantastic experience. I think you've really energized and modernized something that was desperately in need of that. Talk about the timing. Like, why now? Why is the market now ready for a business like Until? Because, as you say, it's an ecosystem play essentially. You're having to do the hard work of bringing together multiple sides.
Sure.
But there's a boom around wellness and health. I imagine, you're playing into the growth of that as a category. But give us a sense of why timing is now right for this business versus, periods in the past.
Sure. And look, I think you touched on a good point, right? It is timing has been a huge factor in our success.
Yeah.
Lots of people have tried to do similar things in the past, and for whatever reason they haven't worked. And time has been a key driver. As you said, health and wellness is at front of mind for a lot of people, and that in many ways is getting more complicated to navigate. More modalities, a much higher expectation on integration across the various elements, and then a lot more Eastern or more traditional medicine coming in, and people, that stuff is harder to navigate, find the right practitioner, because it's just not as well managed, right? There's less certification, there's less standards in some of those spaces, and so that's an opportunity actually. Secondly, I think COVID created a massive shift in the way practitioners think about their role and their value. Right? Instagram, social media had been emerging. Lots of practitioners had been using it to generate, build their brands and build their businesses. But it was really only when COVID happened and these practitioners realized, oh, wow, the customers actually are coming to me. The facility that I was in, which I thought was the reason they were coming to me, is closed. They're still coming to me. And I think, we needed that sort of mental shift to drive the behavior change with the practitioners. And then look, I think finally commercial real estate landlords are thinking very differently about what they offer. It's now not just here's a room, you take it. Now they're realizing that their tenants are their customers and that they have to provide them with amenities that go beyond the physical space that they're renting. And so, that's created an opportunity for us to be able to go in there, help them figure out what that is, really help them support that. And look, I think we're probably one of the leading amenities globally in terms of the breadth of service that we can offer for not just the landlord, but the tenants that exist. And then look, finally, that the only thing I'd add is, the world of health tech is blowing up and is lots of capital, lots of different products. I think needs are changing, and lots of consumer brands have realized relying on Google and Meta to do their advertising for them is quite expensive. And so they're now looking for different ways to access their consumers. And ultimately, that's what I think we are building is almost one of the Trojan horses of our business is we'll be able to go to some of the leading health tech providers and give them access and adoption through our fantastic community of practitioners.
Fantastic. Going back to your period in your life before Until as a consultant, think about your days at What If, like how did that experience allow you to really stress test the value proposition? Because Until is not an easy business to start. It's not a simple product business. It's not a software business where you can code something and put it out in the world. Like this is physical real estate. It's about vetting and finding great practitioners and providing great services. Like it's an important business to start and not an easy business to start. How much did you think about your days as a consultant helped you to really, test the value prop and get that right? And how much time did you spend on that early days? Because, so many entrepreneurs are in a rush to start something. They just want to get out to market. But I get a sense of when I speak with you and Alex, like you really took the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when I meet investors, they often allude to my McKinsey experience as being the driver of kind of some of the foundational success of this business. And I actually totally agree with you. It's that what if experience which helped us do it. And look, we had the slight benefit of building our product was going to be very expensive. So we couldn't afford to make some of the mistakes. But like any entrepreneur, we were eager to get going, build something. But I guess what worked in our favor was we were ignorant, right? We didn't come from the sector. Sure, we had Dan there to provide that customer lens, but we'd never done anything like this across our team. And so we really had to sweat the detail. And one of the things that we learn at What If is all about how do you extract consumer insight? How do you really understand what a customer needs beyond just what they're telling you?
Yeah.
And so we didn't even start thinking about pen to paper until we'd spoken to practitioners. I think, over that first phase of the business, probably spoke to nearly 500 practitioners across the various sizes of the market. I mean, the fact it was COVID helped us, right?
Yeah,
because because people were eager to speak to, there wasn't that, they weren't busy, right?
Yeah.
And so, look, we sat there, we sweated it, we ideated, we made things, we used a lot of realness, which is something where, I think lots of people use the philosophy of focus groups, and that doesn't really work. We had to produce leaflets and go, okay, let's pretend like this thing is real already and use that to stimulate the conversation. And we just learned so much from what the customers thought they wanted versus what they're really willing to pay for. And look, it was a fascinating phase in our journey because, one of the things that we'd heard from practitioners was it's lonely. Any entrepreneur knows building a business is lonely, and being a health and wellness freelance entrepreneur is no different.
Of course.
And so we anchored to community a lot back in the day. Join the community, feel part of something. And whilst that was exciting for them, they weren't willing to pay for it. And so that was one of the early learnings. I mean, look, now it's a very different proposition because at that time, they weren't willing to pay for something that they'd never had before because they didn't see the value in it. And so, we needed some pivots during that time.
And you talked to me when we first met about until the early days of COVID, when I think you were about to take a lease on somewhere, and you were very glad you didn't because the world changed overnight. Can you give a sense of that experience and the stress and the emotional turmoil when you think we're about to get going and then, the world changes?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is what I mean about timing and luck, right? I mean, we'd found what we thought was a dream opportunity. Again, we were pretty naive because whilst we didn't have experience in health and wellness, we also didn't have experience in real estate. And so, and we negotiated a lease, we'd started legals, and, we happened to get some external influence in at the right time. And we identified it was damp in the building. And in that 2-week window where we identified the damp and we're going back and forth with the landlord, lockdown happened. I mean, because, no one at that time, particularly, not me, thought that it would be anything more than a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And so whilst at that time it was disappointing, frustrating, you've built some momentum and you want to get going, it panned well for us. And actually, we ended up doing a better deal with a better landlord in a better location. So sometimes I often remind myself of that moment because there's always ups and downs building any business. And it's very useful to realize that things often happen for a reason. And that if something hasn't quite gone to plan, there may well be a reason that you can't foresee. And that was absolutely the case in that situation.
One of the flagship announcements until May this year was the involvement of Steven Bartlett getting close to the business. Can you give a sense of how that came about, what it's done for the company, and also how he's involved?
Yeah, I mean, look, we just opened our first club. So was it like March 22? And Steven was doing his tour. And so as part of building this community, we bought like 20 or 30 tickets to take some members, some of our team, and I remember talking to my friend, being sat there going, "Oh, it'd be quite cool to get someone like Steven involved. He's got such a great way about him. He's got such a great ethos, but he's also got quite a good pull, both on the practitioner and the consumer side." And so that thought developed. 12 months later, we were at, again, he was now talking at a health and wellness event, and so we went there. We bought 50% of the tickets for a separate fireside chat with him. I mean, it was. Look, it was one of those things. I tried a couple of ways to get to him and none of them really felt like they were working out. And so we kind of made it happen, went there. At that point, I think he was like, okay, I mean, either he thought we were crazy or obsessive, but, brought to life our business. And, then it was a 6-month journey to get him on board. Originally, it was just come to our space. I want to take some photos, just, create some social media hype. Then the conversation about investment started, and then I think there's such a strong synergy with what he believes in and what he's doing. If you think about the words of entrepreneurship and health and wellness, that it felt like a very comfortable fit. And
That's
so,
fantastic.
yeah. So look, he joined the business, and him and his team have been like fantastic from a kind of positioning and brand building perspective, right? I mean, what they do, they are world class. Yeah. But as a business, our biggest challenge was market awareness and education, right? And he's created us the platform to be able to do that. I think before that moment, even despite opening a club and a second one, most people thought we were mental. So it gave us a bit of validation and it gave us a bit of momentum, and then we've been able to build on that.
And you mentioned he joined as an investor, and I know you announced a fundraising round earlier this year. But give other entrepreneurs a sense of how different it is to start and fund a business centered around real estate. Because so many companies, start today, are products, they're doing drop shipping, or it's software, and they're putting something together, and it's quick and it's easy and it's rapid. Yeah. But with physical real estate, it's the opposite. Yeah. It's slow and it's expensive, and you need to fund the business very differently, and the decisions you have to make are very different. But give us a sense of how you view that difference from other companies.
I mean, I think to your point, unlike a digital business, I mean, look, when it comes to product businesses, you still have some restrictions, but tweaking an element of real physical product versus ripping down a wall or restructuring is quite different. So we have to move slower in some instances, and just be a bit more considered, but also force us to be more creative around how do you create that flexibility in what's traditionally a very fixed environment. But the funding is different. It's really different. And so what didn't help us was the whole narrative around WeWork. Right. That's been one of the things that we've had to get over, just because I think there's a lot of noise and misinformation about that business and what worked about it and what didn't. But equally, that's often been the challenge, right? Is people look at our business and they either go, oh, you're like a WeWork for fitness practitioners. And you can imagine Alex dies a little bit every time he hears that. I know I do. Because our business model is foundationally different, and we're not just for fitness. But there's just different types of debt you have to consider when you're building physical space. And so, not debt, capital. And so absolutely, you're raising money. You need to, because you still have teams to pay. You still have costs as a business. But when it comes to building your physical space, you can tap into new pools. And, landlords are very keen to contribute to our model because it builds on what their proposition is. And then, external debt is easier because you're buying stuff. Right. There is, asset financing, and, people can come in and go, okay, I'm buying a physical space. But that creates risks and liabilities. And so it's just about finding the right balance. So, I'm often thinking about, when we're thinking about operationally what it takes to run a business, if you build a digital business, sure, there's the maintenance cost, but a huge proportion of our fixed cost base is just having the spaces for our practitioners to use.
And how stressful are those moments when you're opening those new sites? I went along just before it opened to the Marylebone site behind Selfridges, and it's a huge space. It's a fantastic space. I think I saw you 72 hours before opening, hard hats on, doing the final snagging. How stressful are those moments when you're about to open these new sites? You spend a long time working on a lot of people with expectations, and members are going to turn up on the Monday and start operating from there.
I mean, it's classic, right? Every time, I mean, this is the third time, and every time you go there, like 3 or 4 days before, you're like, surely this is not going to be ready. Like, it does not look in any way, shape or form like you're going to be able to welcome people. And somehow they always pull it off. I mean, the reality is, Adam, for me, it's not that stressful because the team are so good at what they do. And a lot of the stress sits with them. But look, I think it is challenging, right? And you're having to deal with all sorts. We often have challenges with no front doors, or this critical unit, which means the door opens and closes, hasn't arrived, or water issues or noise issues. And they're just in the physical environment, there's just other challenges to think about. And you have to plan for stuff not going to plan. Like, when we first opened our club in Soho, we were meant to open in November. So almost 3 months prior to what we had actually ended up opening. and that was all to do with fire risk assessments and sign-offs, and and that's a moment where it's out of your hands. And as an entrepreneur, it's really frustrating and stressful, right? When there's a situation which is just, you have no control over. Yeah. It's just the nature of the business that we're in that we have to be.
How do you deal with stress, Vish? What's your tactics? What have you learned to deal with stress in those moments?
Yeah. So I didn't actually think I used to get stressed. I then had my bloods done, which made me realize actually the stress is just turning up in different ways. I mean, look, I think the thing, for me, I'm pretty focused on like looking after myself. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's always quite nerve-wracking sitting on panels. We're in the health and wellness sector, and everyone else has been training since they were 12. That's twice the size of you. So that keeps me going to the gym. But also, I think like training and looking after myself in that context is now a pretty critical part of what I do. And being on a startup salary, now it's quite challenging to afford that personal training, but it's one of my critical investments, right?
It means no shortage of access to the best people to help you.
They're also some of the most expensive, but anyways, no, but absolutely right. It's I think that time is for me, and so for a long time I didn't train in our clubs. Yeah. And so often people are like, we don't understand. This is your space, and why wouldn't you train here? And the problem was it was work. Yeah. And it's natural when you're in your work environment, you'll spot things, you'll see things, your clients are there. And so it was really hard. Yeah. And so I, until very recently, had never trained in our spaces, because it was that me time.
Yeah. So, I hear that. And going back to the decisions you have to make around real estate in particular, and some of those big capital decisions, how do you think about decision making generally? And how do you think about how you got better at decision making? How much do you think about relying on your leadership team to make decisions? How much, decisions stop with you? Like, I'm really, I think about ultimately as great CEOs, great founders, like you are measured by the decisions you make. Sure. And each day is just another day full of more decisions, small ones, big ones. Like, how do you think about decision making?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't make every decision, right? And if you find yourself making all the decisions, your business is going to stop growing. Yeah. And so, foundationally, you have to trust your team. You have to build a culture where you create trust, but you also listen. And look, I have not always got that right, but it's something that we work hard to do. Yeah. I think, look, we use the classic, one door, two door, type 1, type 2, whatever your version of it is. Yeah. But, if a decision can't easily be reversed, which by the way, there's a lot of them in our space, we have to do the work, right? Go and get the insight, go and get the external provocation, go and ask the members. Don't just use your experience or your own point of view to do it. And whereas if it's a type 2 decision, you can change it, then we can be a bit more fluid. We can try stuff, we can, move at pace. And I think pace, whilst real estate doesn't move very quickly, our business does move at pace. And I think pace is pretty important for the success of a startup. Yeah. And then look, finally, simplicity. I think our business is complicated enough. Most businesses look simple on the outside, but have lots of internal complexity. So don't add more complexity. Yeah. And again, my team will listen to this and be like, "Are you joking? Does he think things are simple?" But I think trying to keep things simple. Yeah. It's why we would never try and build an F&B proposition in our business. Yeah. We're never going to be world class at it. Yeah. So if we need to do F&B for whatever reason, we will partner with a world class F&B provider. Yeah. Like, do what you're good at and don't try and do more than that.
Yeah. I love how ambitious Until is. And one of the things that we talked a lot about is international. How do you take what's working here in London and take that, not just to the rest of the UK, but around the world? Mm-hmm. And I think that's really exciting, because I think you guys are building one of the most ambitious and what can be one of the biggest businesses to come out of the UK. How do you think about international?
Carefully, right? I think it's really easy to go, oh, let's just grow internationally, we'll just do it. And look, I've got US healthcare experience. And so, the risk is I feel like, oh, it's even easier than it really is. I mean, I think when you go internationally, you do have to deal with different cultures, different dynamics, different environments. As you mentioned, the US is where we're really looking to go in the short term. And often people go, oh, US, big country. It's not. It's 50 different jurisdictions, particularly when you're building physical space, it has different environments. And so, international is critical for us because we didn't start this business to build it just for the UK. I think there's lots of negativity about the UK economy. But one thing that, very well, and you're a great example of it, is we have some of the best entrepreneurs in the world. And so I'm really excited about taking this concept, which doesn't exist anywhere globally, and going and tackling the international markets. But it's important also because health and wellness is internationalizing. Our practitioners are working internationally. Gone are the days where a practitioner, you trained, you learned, you stayed in one location. We have practitioners, we have an osteopath that goes to Dubai once a quarter. We have a dentist who seems to go to Dubai once a month. We have an aesthetic practitioner who goes to the US every couple of months to see their clients. Because particularly London, you talked about Harley Street earlier. It's like the center. It's really highly rated from a kind of health and wellness perspective. And so the rest of the world is really keen to engage with those practitioners. And I feel like it's our responsibility to take our incredible community and give them genuine like global tourism in this sector. And so it's just a question of when, not if. And we have to do it carefully. We have to do it carefully because if we don't have a strong foundation in London, you then risk everything crumbling, right? Because going back to simplicity, that international is just a whole new level of complexity.
For sure. One of the things I've been most impressed about as I've got to know the business is how well you surrounded yourself with great advisors, those who have experience across a number of sectors, from real estate through to health and wellness, through to digital. Like, you've really taken the time to surround yourself with a great advisory board, with great investors. How important is that for you? And what can you share with others about who perhaps don't have that network, how they can go about establishing contacts and a network that's going to really help and propel their growth?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the beliefs that I have is that business is all about people. And ultimately it all comes down to execution. It comes down to the talent you put around you. But often when people think about their teams, they think about their teams internally. And I've had the benefit of learning that your team is your personal life, your family, but equally some of the advisors, that we've been fortunate to have in our business. I think, look, it's a foundational element because you just don't know what you don't know. And some of the most exciting conversations we have are when we put a couple of those experts together and ask them to talk about a topic that's not their expertise, because they apply just a different lens and a different framing. And so, and it's just provocation. I think sometimes entrepreneurs feel like they have to do it all themselves, and it's a dangerous place to be because you just can't. I used to think I knew loads about funding until about 6 weeks ago. And you'll have heard people talk about the more they learn, the more they realize they don't know. And that's apparently in every side of our business. And so when you're forging something new, like many entrepreneurs are, having that kind of wisdom and that, people who've been on that journey before around you is really valuable. You don't have to take everything they say as gospel. But you have to treat it as stimulus and provocation to really stress test your decisions and your judgment. And look, I think I hear from lots of people, oh, I don't have the network. I mean, get the network, right? Like, we are far more blessed today than those entrepreneurs that were building business even 10, 15 years ago. Accessing talent, accessing experts, is just easier. You just have to ask.
You're a message away from anyone.
And I think don't be lazy about it. Don't blanket send messages to 500 people on LinkedIn, because guess what? Like, the best people will not respond to that. But actually, most people who have been successful want to give back, right? They want to help other entrepreneurs. They want to help people grow and develop, because people would have helped them on their journey. And so I think take a chance. And look, Steven's a great example, right? Like, remember, it was a conversation sat on a stage in his show, and there wasn't any direct connection, but it was just pure push and perseverance that eventually just got us into that conversation. And I feel blessed to have the people that we have around us. I mean, it is just incredible.
And does that help you raise your game, Vish? Does that help you stay motivated and keep the energy levels high?
I mean, it's a reminder, right? When you're sat there and you're having a bad day and you're now surrounded by a group of people that could be doing absolutely anything else. Yeah. And, it's not like we pay them brilliantly. They're definitely not doing it for the money. And they take their time and they come together and they talk to you about your business. I mean, it reminds you that you're doing something special. Yeah. And so that energy that people give you is incredible. And, look, you need that motivation on the tough days. Yeah.
Where do you find those motivation? Where do you find that ongoing motivation when, as you say, the days are tough, the days are long? What fuels you? What have you found that works to kind of really remind yourself of how this vision, when it comes together, how big it can be, but also not be overwhelmed by that either?
Yeah, I mean, the customers, right? I mean, again, being a physical space, I can walk into our clubs. Yeah. And I can be interacting with the members whose lives we've changed. Yeah. And, they'll come to me and go, do you know what, Vish, I've just been able to buy my dream car. This would never have happened. Or I've just been able to buy a house. I didn't think that was an option. Or, I joined here on a day a week. Now I've got a team of people. Yeah. And when we started this business, for me, the thing that gets me out of bed is unlocking potential. And I like to do it through business, but the ability to do it for people that are changing people's lives, that's the thing that keeps me going. And then look, team, I was talking to a founder a couple of weeks ago, and he's a sole founder. And that, I have so much, I have so much, I don't know how they do it. Yeah. Sole founders is a tough gig. Yeah. Because when I'm not having a good day, one of my other team will pick me up. Yeah. And so, that's the other thing to remember. Surround yourself with brilliant people. Yeah. And it's one of the best bits of my job, right? I get to choose who I work with. Yeah. And I feel that that's a gift. Yeah. Yeah.
What's been the most rewarding part of Until? What's been the most rewarding part of building it? And for you as an entrepreneur, because I often think, entrepreneurship is a personal growth story with a business on the side, and you grow so much daily. All through all those challenges, through all of that stress, you grow through it. But what's been the most rewarding part?
I mean, honestly, I think back, and obviously there's been moments, closing fundraising, opening sites, bringing on Steven, and I'm sure there'll be lots of those moments over the coming years. But I think for me, rewarding is the day to day, right? As an entrepreneur, you often forget that you're getting to choose what you work on. You're getting, for me, work-life balance has been lots of conversations about that. It sounds trite, but there is no difference for me, right? I'm having a good time. And so that's the thing that's rewarding, is that I've been able to take that decision and make that option. Yeah. I think that's what keeps me going. But, also it's what feels quite rewarding is that I have that choice. Yeah. Because not everyone does.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Final question, Vish. If you weren't building Until, if you weren't an entrepreneur, what else would you be doing?
Do you know what? I get asked this question, I've been asked this question before, and I find it really difficult because I can't imagine what I would be doing if it wasn't Until now, to be honest. I mean, look, I was always going to be building businesses. That was my thing. In fact, I always said that I would never start anything new. Yeah. It just feels like the hardest thing to do. I always was like, I'll go find one of those boring businesses and I'll just execute them better. Yeah. And guess what? That's a much easier journey than starting something new. And so I suspect I'd have probably been doing something like that.
But not as fun.
But it's just, it's, I think forging a new path has its challenges, but whenever we've done it, I've always reflected and gone, it felt really hard at the time, but it was worth it.
Yeah. Vish, thank you so much for joining us. That was brilliant to hear that story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.